Hello, welcome back to the Flanagan Photos video podcast. This is an excerpt from Milky Way podcast number 94 with astrophotographer Matt Dieterich, for those who are just interested in the photos. So here's Matt to discuss two of his Milky Way panorama photos. So that's the one you have behind you.
This was a newer one from Craters of the Moon National Monument that I shot. So it's showing the arcing Milky Way, and comet Neowise was there on the horizon, and we were up atop this plateau called Inferno Cone, and it's one of the cinder cones at Craters of the Moon National Monument in Idaho. But one of the cool things I like about panoramas is you can really put the scale of the night sky in perspective, in my opinion. So that's one of the fun things, and you could start seeing a lot of the different objects in the night sky. You know, like if we zoom in, you could start to see not only our galactic arm, this is the galaxy of our arm, and there's some cool hydrogen areas that are nebula, just kind of hydrogen gas and dust. But one of the cool things with panoramas is just the resolution that you can get. And this is a smaller image that I can press down. So on the original image, you could zoom in a lot, but this is the Andromeda galaxy. That's another galaxy in the middle of this photo here. That's one of the closest ones to us. And of course, you have Comet Neowise on the horizon, and then the core of the Milky Way on the right-hand side. So that was one of the funnest ones to shoot from the park, especially with the fact that the comet was visible. It was one of my ones that I enjoyed shooting the most, and created quite a few prints out of it for people.
Yeah, I can see why. So do you have to do any color correction for the Milky Way or the scene itself?
For this one, what I do is I use I guess it's the gray point eyedropper tool, and I'll find when I start doing my editing of the night sky in the panoramas, I'll find an area of background sky, because the further away from the Milky Way you get, if you could find a dark area, and I'll color balance on that to kind of create a neutral, align all the RGB channels. And if you use the gray point eyedropper tool in levels or curves, or Adobe Camera Raw, you can just zoom in and click to color balance if the color balance becomes off a little bit. And I'll just do that up in the dark portion of the sky where there's no Milky Way, or in this case, this green was air glow. And that's an atmospheric phenomenon from solar radiation that gets absorbed by oxygen molecules, and at night it'll give off this glow that the camera can pick up. So I wouldn't want to color balance on the green, because it will throw off the color balance for the rest of the image. But if you find a neutral area, blank sky, that's where I like to color balance and set the gray points. And from there, the colors become, to me, as natural as I can kind of keep them, and continue editing from there.
Okay. So the Milky Way, if you're in a really dark area, it looks like you get some reds in it in addition to the other colors.
Yeah, and I was using a special camera. I had a modification done to the piece of glass that's in front of the camera sensor. So the camera lets in more of what's called this hydrogen alpha. That's just the wavelength that these emission nebula, those are just the objects that are seen here, these red areas. Those are hydrogen emission nebulae that are just giving off red portions in the visible spectrum. And stock camera bodies that don't have the modification done, that red doesn't come through as much, because it's actually being blocked by the filter in front of the camera sensor that all cameras are shipped with. So the modification lets you record more of that red color in the night sky that are in hydrogen areas, which are quite a lot. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. So there's a lot of a red nebulae out there to photograph, which is cool.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I know that sometimes you have to take that piece of glass off to do IR
Yeah,
photography, but I didn't know about
exactly.
astrophotography.
Correct. Yeah, it's doing those modifications opens up a cool new perspective on those targets. You can still see them with a regular stock camera, but the modification allows, I think it's 90 plus or more percent of that light to come in. So you're able to record pretty much all that hydrogen color that the original stock camera would be blocking. So it makes it pop a little bit more when you edit, which is cool, especially when you get to a good dark sky location to see them.
All right. Yeah. Very cool. Do you do any compositing? So you expose for the foreground and then for the sky, or you do that in post?
For this shot, I haven't done many composite shots. What I try to do is with this panorama. This was I think a 20 image panorama with the Nikon Z6 that was modified and just that Rokinon 24 millimeter lens. So I'll just manually move the camera to take those 20 images. And as you can see, the ground was very dark because it was a dark location. So I had some lights that kind of illuminated. There was a couple other people shooting there that night. So I think maybe some of their headlamp illuminated the bush a little bit there, but I thought that kind of looked cool, so I left it in. But you know, with composites, I mean, people can be as creative as they want I've seen folks shoot the night sky at one location and some will like to blend in that night sky into a different scene to kind of create their own artistic vision of space art or whatever they may kind of feel like creating. And I've seen more of that come into play with digital editing. And but for me, I try to just keep it the way the scene was set up, and I'll just shoot the whole scene with that lens and make sure I overlap enough between images so the software, when you edit, will stitch, because you have to overlap the photos so they blend together. And I created a tutorial actually on this exact how to create this photo, and I'd offered it on my website. If anyone that joins my newsletter will get a free 40-minute tutorial video and the raw files that they could edit along and just try it. So it's something I wanted to do for people that were looking to learn the art of shooting panoramas. And having good data is definitely helpful, to learn the technique.
Sure. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the more advanced ways of photographing the Milky Way in the night sky.
Yeah. So I guess this type of shooting, maybe I'll go over to one of the next photos to show an example. So panoramas, in my opinion, are definitely a more advanced technique. With this, like I noted, this was about 20 images or 16. I forget what I did. I tried to shoot even up to 24 images to have enough overlap, because it's hard to go back to that location, and actually kind of impossible to get those same exact conditions and fix. Say if you missed a photo right in the middle of the panorama, then you're at a loss of a full panorama. So panoramas are an advanced technique that are actually pretty simple to learn how to shoot once you practice. And you can practice that technique in daytime and just practice overlapping photos and creating one final big image. So
you're doing this on a tripod, I'm assuming.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is another example of a panorama that I shot, but this one was down in Chile. So you could tell it looks a lot different than the other photo. I mean, look at the core of the Milky Way there, the brightest where it was in the photo from Idaho, the sky latitude. And this is a good example of that. This was in the southern hemisphere, where the Milky Way, like I noted, will be higher in the night sky, and the core becomes more visible because you're below the equator. So it's another cool reason that once you learn the camera techniques, you can get out and take panoramas and night sky photos anywhere on the planet and really create photos that are compelling. And this was from one of the lodges that we stayed at on a trip, which was pretty cool.
And you're shooting with the camera in a vertical position, I'm assuming.
For these panoramas, ironically, I'll actually shoot it in landscape mode. And I'll usually start up in like a corner, and I'll just take the camera, and each photo, I'll just move it down a little bit. And you kind of watch and just overlap each photo while you look. You could just watch a certain star and then just move it down to make sure that that's still in the field of view, because you want to overlap about 30% between photos, because you can imagine that if you try blending those photos, the software can't recognize a photo against another photo if there's not another portion of the overlapping image for it to recognize. So it blends based on the overlap between photos. So I guess my rule of thumb is try to overlap more than you think you do, because then you have the data. You like I noted, you can't go back and shoot the same exact scene once you get home after, say a 4,000 mile trip to go shoot somewhere. But I've done a few portrait orientations if I'm just doing like a horizon scene of the Milky Way. But with these photos, I really like doing portrait style or landscape style, and just moving it down and overlapping the camera frames just so they can blend together and have a final image as well. This was 20 to 24 images of the night sky, big field of view.
So you're doing a vertical panorama in essence, I guess, huh?
Essentially. And it comes down to my end goal is that I want these usually in, 4:6 format, or I think in this one, this was a 3:2 style, which I guess same thing, but it depends on what orientation, like if people want to create prints. So with that style of panorama shooting, it gives you enough area to crop in and create that 3:2 size image ratio and create cool prints of the night sky. Because for me, a lot of times that's the end goal when I think about shooting something is shooting it so I can create a good a standard size aspect ratio that could be turned into a photograph and hung on the wall.
So do you have to do multiple rows, or are you just doing one row and then going down vertically, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, so you could do it, I guess, either or. For me, I like starting, if I say for this image, I started at the top left of the photograph, and then I just go straight down in a column, and then I shift over, and then I go straight up. And then, I just go column, and then I shift and keep going. So you could break this down into, I usually do 4 images in a column, and then 6 rows of those. So that's how I'll get the 24 images of that night sky scene. So as long as you overlap enough, Photoshop or Microsoft Ice or PT GUI, those softwares can see the pattern and they can blend them. And then a lot of times you have to correct for the horizon, like I had to do in that Atacama Desert shot, to get the horizon nice and straight and level.
Okay, how do you keep all those straight so you know how to blend them?
Yeah, well, that's what's cool nowadays with at least my Nikon, and I think Canon and probably Sony, on your camera LCD, you can change the info button so it gives you that the bubble level style. Basically, you can see make sure that your camera is not tilted to one side. On my Nikon, when I'm level, it'll show the tilt, right? It'll show it in yellow, and when I'm green, I know I'm level. So all I'll do is I'll keep the camera up at the very high, just camera, tripod, and ball head. That's all I use for this. And I'll just aim the camera up. And then once I'm done with that 20 or 15-second photo, I'll move it down and overlap it 30% and watch that level on the live view and just make sure I keep it level. And that's such a wide field of view. As long as you don't have a camera tilted by, 60 degrees between photos, you'll be able to overlap all the photos and keep it relatively uniform and level by just watching the back screen digital kind of level they already had built into the camera, which is cool.
Okay. And then when you get into Photoshop, does the photo, you have to align each vertical first and then the horizontal, or how does that work?
Luckily, it's as simple as grabbing all the photos that you shot and pulling those in. For me, I pull them in with Adobe Camera Raw, and then I'll kind of make my white balance adjustment, and I'll remove the camera vignetting with the lens profiles. So you could profile out the vignetting, which is the dark ring around the images, because you can imagine that all those images will have a lot of different vignetting. So you want it to be uniform. And when you remove the vignetting, that's going to make it as uniform as possible to create essentially one massive photo. And, Photoshop has that, the photo merge, which is their just blending of the images, that it's pretty automated. I don't have to manually move anything. I just pull in the photos and remove vignetting and color balance. And then I run I think it's under File, Automate Photo Merge, and it'll ask me to open the photos and run them. And if I find after it blended them together that sometimes a photo will be missing, it won't recognize a certain photo. And then if that doesn't work, I'll try the other blending softwares for panoramas like Microsoft Ice or PT GUI until I can hopefully get an image that is ready to edit as one final main image like this one.
Okay. So do you have to worry about the night sky moving when you're taking long exposures like that and taking multiple ones?
Surprisingly, and I thought about this same question that you asked when I started, but surprisingly, since the lens is such a wide field lens, that any movement in the night sky is actually, it doesn't hurt the image. And to shoot 20 images that are 15 seconds each, if I'm using my 24 millimeter lens at f1.4, then the minimal movement doesn't affect the blending process. And that goes back again to shooting a few more photos around the edges than you might think you want, because you want to crop in to the end photo. For me, that's the end goal, is to create a print that I could put up for people to hopefully hang on their walls, or for me to print and hang on the wall. So you want to just overlap enough and shoot. So that's the minimal sky movement. I've never seen it affected, especially with just 15-second photos. It'll take 15 to 20 minutes to shoot that whole field of view. So it's a little bit of time, but not enough to affect the photo.
Okay, good to know. Thanks, Matt, for sharing your wonderful panoramas of the Milky Way and your expertise as an astrophotographer. If you'd like to watch the full episode, it's podcast number 94 from September 30th, 2020.